Okay, so I'm in the process of learning how to crown, level and crown, and ultimately refret guitar necks. And I thought I'd take out my trusty Dremel tool and use it to polish up the frets using some fine diamond grit that I have. I have some grit of diamond that goes from 3.5 to 0.25 microns. I thought that would make for some really nice frets. So it turned out my trusty Dremel tool, not so trusty anymore. It stopped working. It wouldn't run. Not much anyway. When you'd squeeze it on the sides, which is where the commutator brushes are, it would run briefly. And that's an indication that the commutator brushes are not making proper contact with the motor. So you have to then pull the brushes and replace them, a simple and relatively inexpensive maintenance task on these primitive motors. I'm supposed to do it every 50 hours on these, which is remarkable. Imagine if you had to do something like that to the motor on your air conditioner every 50 hours. It's really quite primitive. In any case, when I tried to do that, the brushes wouldn't come out. In fact, they snapped off inside. They would not come out. This is a common failure motor, the Dremel 300. I don't know, maybe some other Dremel tools too. Dremel hasn't admitted to it, but if you look online, you find lots of people saying the same thing, that the brushes don't come up. It's a design defect. So we had to try to take it apart and get out the residual brushes. So how are we going to do that? Well, I've taken out 3 of the 4 screws. Here's the last screw. It's pretty much loose. Pop it out. Okay, these are just Allen screws. Okay, take a fraction inch Allen screw. Put it in here so I don't lose it. Okay, and now with the cord part kind of sticking up, if you will, lay it flat and use a screwdriver to, actually no, first you have to take this part off here. That's the last part that holds it together. Screws right off. Now you use a screwdriver to split it apart. And it comes apart quite easily. Just a plastic housing here. And now we can see a couple of bearings, the spindle. This is the fan that cools everything. The motor. Okay. The wires input, simple wire input here. And now I've got to take it apart. So it turns out, and when you do this, you have to be a little bit careful because there's a little spring thing here that could come flying out if you're not careful. It doesn't have to come out, but it will if it wants to. There's a little spring that holds the device, the plunger that locks the spindle for changing tools of these old styles. Now these wires just pull out, believe it or not. Whoops. Supposed to just pull out. There we go. And then this rubber piece comes off right here. And then if you're lucky, it comes apart like this. If you're not lucky, as in my case, the brushes were jammed in there such that I couldn't get this bearing to come out. And I had to go inside of there and use some sharp tools to slowly grind away the brushes so that I can get this thing apart. When I got it apart, I could take it, and now you can kind of see into it. And I was able to get some tools in there and punch out the brushes. Okay, there's still a little bit of brush residue in one of them that I've got to clean out. As far as I can tell, the brushes melted or something in place. It was kind of bad. Again, this is a very primitive device, nothing that your great-grandfather didn't know about. So the brushes are out, and I can't replace them until I put it back together. So how do you put it back together? Well, just the same way you took it apart. So this goes back on here. It's got to go in the right direction. If you do it wrong, it'll actually go together, but then it won't fit into the housing properly. And then you have to take it apart and do it a different way. Put the rubber thingy back on. Interesting. Another sort of guaranteed to fail part of all this primitive design. Now we jam these wires back into their respective slots. They just slot right in, and they grip pretty well. Again, well, they grip pretty well. Again, an interesting design for a relatively expensive tool, pretty primitive. But quick and dirty to assemble, no doubt, in the factory. Oops, got to get this little ring in place. It's definitely tricky. Not designed for ease of maintainability. And then the whole thing snaps back together. It should rotate freely. If it doesn't rotate freely, you didn't put it together right. Anyway, now just put it back together now. Put this on, screw the screws in, and if you're lucky, it'll work once you replace the brushes. All right, hope this helps. I couldn't find one like it for me, and hope it helps you.